Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Wa ala alihi wa sahbihi at-tayyibin at-tahirin. The author says, may Allah have mercy upon him. Fa'idah, benefit. SubhanAllah, we have noise coming from different directions right now, so we'll all be patient, inshallah. قال المتكلم أبو المظفر الأسفرايني, the theologian Abu al-Muzaffar al-Asfarayini said, ما نصه, quote, فقد رد الله تعالى على الجبرية والقدرية في آية واحدة. Allah Ta'ala refuted the Jabriyah and the Qadariyah in a single verse. He refuted those who deny the will of the slave and those who deny destiny. Yani, those are two polar opposite sects. Those who deny the will of the slave means they believe the slave doesn't do anything. So for sure they deny that the slaves can create anything, because they deny that the slaves even do anything. And that's too far. And that's blasphemy. And the Qadariyah, they deny, they confirm that the slaves create their own actions, which is blasphemy also. So they do confirm that they do something, but so far as to believe that they can create their own actions, with the meaning of bringing them forth into being from nothingness. Even if they say, well, we use limbs and tools, they still believe that they can bring something into existence from nothing. So Abu al-Muzaffar says, Allah refuted both of these groups in a single ayah, حيث قال, where he said, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. O Muhammad, if I translate it as literally as I can, it would come out as, you did not throw when you threw, rather Allah threw. So, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ, and you did not throw, إِذْ رَمَيْتَ, when you threw. What happened there? There's a negation and a confirmation. You did not throw, that's a denial, meaning that's a negation. إِذْ رَمَيْتَ, when you threw, that's a confirmation. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى, rather, Allah threw. That's very literal. So, وَمَعْنَاهُ, it means وَمَا رَمَيْتَ مِنْ حَيْثُ الْخَلْقِ وَمَا رَمَيْتَ مِنْ حَيْثُ الْخَلْقِ. You did not throw, meaning you did not create the throwing. إِذْ رَمَيْتَ, when you threw, مِنْ حَيْثُ الْكَسْبِ, when you threw as an acquisition, as an acquired deed. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى مِنْ حَيْثُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْكَسْبِ خَلَقَهُ خَلْقًا لِنَفْسِهِ كَسْبًا لِعَبْدِهِ. Rather, Allah threw with the meaning of creating the throwing and creating your acquisition of it. He created the throwing as a creation of His, not an act of His, not an acquisition of His, not something He earned, not an earned deed, rather as a created creation. Kasban li'abdih, and as an acquisition for His slave. He created it as an acquisition for His slave. He made it an earned deed of the slave. فهو مخلوق لله تعالى من وجهين. And so it is a creation of Allah from two perspectives. And it's not a creation of the slave from any perspective, but it is a deed of the slave. And it is an action of the slave. And it is a doing of the slave, but it's not a creation of the slave. And I advise any Muslim to abstain from using the word creation for other than Allah. I didn't say he's a kafir. I am advising. Reserve that word for Allah and use other words for creation, like making something or doing something. Someone might say it's not that big of a deal, because we know what we mean when we say what we say as Muslims. And I would say that's why there's a difference between muhaqqiqun and others. There's a difference between precise ones, accurate ones, scrupulous ones, and others. Some who are looser. Even scholars, they might be very knowledgeable, but they loose. So they're not muhaqqiqun. Intaha, end quote. Tanbih. Notice. بعض الحنفية يسيء الأدب مع الأشاعرة. Some Hanafis have bad manners with Ash'aris. وَيُشَبِّهُهُمْ بِالْمُجْبِرَةِ. And they liken them to the people who deny the will of the slave. المذكورة التي هي إحدى فرق الضالات. التي هي إحدى فرق الضلالات. That aforementioned sect, that's one of the sects of deviances, strayings. لأن إمامهم, because their imam, أي الأشعري, meaning Al-Ash'ari, نص على أن للعبد قدرة مخلوقة غير مؤثرة. He explicitly said that the slave has a created power, an ineffective created power. بل كاسبة فقط. Rather, it's just an acquiring power. It is a power nevertheless. وهذا من باب العصبية منهم للماتريدية. And this behavior is due to bigotry, partisanship, hyper-partisanship for the Maturidis. ولا داعي إلى ذلك. And there is no need for this. Yani, no Maturidi should put an Ash'ari down, nor should an Ash'ari put a Maturidi down. If they're going to have scholarly debate about some issues, that's another thing. But it's already established that the Maturidis and the Ash'aris are brothers in creed. Neither group deems the other as heretics or blasphemers. وَلَوْ قِيلَ لِهَذَا الْحَنَفِيِّ. And if it were said to this Hanafi, أَلَيْسَ تَعْتَقِدُ أَنَّ مَا يَفْعَلُهُ الْعَبْدُ سَبَقَ فِي عِلْمِ اللَّهِ سَبَقَ فِي عِلْمِ اللَّهِ أَنَّهُ يَفْعَلُهُ. Don't you have the conviction that whatever the slave does was previously known to God, that he would do it in eternity? Known to God in eternity that he would do it? So he's going to say yes, or the right answer is Bala, because of the question Alaysa. The affirmative to this question is Bala. فهل يمكنه ألا يفعل ذلك? So, since we agree here, would it be possible for the slave to not do that? وهل له من سبيل إلى ترك ذلك كي لا يقع منه? And does he have a way to not do that so that it doesn't come from him? يقول لا سبيل له. He would say he has no way. لأن الله علم أنه سيقع منه. Because Allah knows that it will come from him. فلا بد أن يفعله باختياره لسبق علم الله بذلك. And so it is inevitable that he shall do it by his own choice because of God's prior knowledge about that. ويقال له, and it is said to him, فهل هذا يجعله قسما من أهل الجبر? So would this make him a division of the people of Jabr, the people who deny the will and choice of the slaves? يقول كلا. He says, absolutely not. نقول له. So we say to him, لما تفرق بين الأشعرية وبين الماتريدية بأن جعلت الأشعرية قسما من المجبرة? Then why are you differentiating between the Ash'aris and the Maturidis by making the Ash'aris some sort of deniers of the slave's will? وهل هذا إلا تعصب منشأه الهوى? Question mark. And is this anything but bigotry whose source is an inappropriate preference? قال المؤلف رحمه الله, said the author, may Allah have mercy upon him, وَالْحَسَنُ مِنْهَا بِرِضَاءِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. And the good of those deeds of the manslaves is by God's acceptance. Exalted is He. وَالْقَبِيحُ مِنْهَا لَيْسَ بِرِضَائِهِ تَعَالَى. And the ugly of them is not by His acceptance. Exalted is He. SharH, the explanation. أن أفعال العباد قسمان, is that the actions of the manslaves of God are of two types, two divisions. حسن وقبيح, good and ugly, or good and bad. Hasan could mean beautiful. Let's just say good. فَالْحَسَنُ مِنْهَا بِرِضَاءِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. And so the good of them is by God's acceptance. Exalted is He. أي بمحبته كما أنه بمشيئته. Just as it is by His will. By His acceptance and by His will. The acceptance is not the will. It's valid to say that His acceptance is one of His doings. The Maturidi way is that His doings are eternal attributes of His. And that doing is granting the subject a certain status. والقبيح منها وهو ما كان معصية أو مكروها ليس برضائه. And the ugly of them, meaning the bad deeds, which is whatever was a sin or even disliked, that disliked is an ugly deed. So here, ugly might be better than bad. Because makruh is not haram, so do we want to call makruh deed a bad deed? I personally am not inclined to do so. But Shaykh is telling us here, makruh and ma'asiyah, which is haram, a haram, forbidden act, and a makruh, a disliked or an avoided act, both fall under the category, the qism, said this qisman, both fall under the category of qabih, which literally translates as ugly. Laysa bi rida'i, it's not by his acceptance. Qala Allahu Ta'ala, said God, exalted is He. وَلَا يَرُضَى لِعِبَادِهِ الْكُفْرِ, and He does not accept for His man-slaves blasphemy. That's the 7th ayah of Surah Zumar. فَالْحَاصِلُ أَنَّ الْإِرَادَةَ وَالْمَشِيئَةَ وَالتَّقْدِيرَ يَتَعَلَّقُ بِالْكُلِّ. So the synopsis is that the will of God and His destining are related to all of it, the good deeds and the ugly deeds, the beautiful deeds and the ugly deeds, or the unpreferable deeds. والرضاء والمحبة والأمر لا يتعلق إلا بالحسن دون القبيح. But the acceptance and the command are not related, but to the good deeds, not the unpreferable ones. Mas'ala, case. أفعال العباد خلق لله تعالى وكسب للعباد. The actions of God's man-slaves are a creation of God, exalted is He, and an acquisition for the man-slaves. That means an earning. They earn their deeds. They acquire their deeds means they earn them. Yani, they collect them. الكسب والاكتساب واحد. Kasb and iktisab, these two Arabic words in particular, are the same according to the terminology of Sunni theology. يعني, according to علم الكلام. لكن عبر في القرآن الكريم عن هذا الأمر بلفظين. However, in the noble Quran, this matter was expressed with two expressions, or phrased with two expressions. This matter of the collected deeds of the slaves, their earned, acquired deeds, was expressed with two wordings. كما في قوله تعالى, just as in what God said, exalted is He. لها ما كسبت وعليها ما اكتسبت. In every soul's favor is what it kasabat, earned, and against every soul, yani, to every soul's detriment, is what it iktasabat, earned or acquired. That's the 286th verse of Surah Al-Baqarah. للدلالة على أن الحسن من أعمال العباد النفس تجد منه مشقة. So it was expressed with these two wordings, which their difference doesn't appear in translation, to prove that the good actions of the man-slaves The self of these slaves finds difficulty in them. لأن النفس مجبولة على حب الراحة, because the self, the soul, is naturally inclined to love relaxation or leisure. وفي أداء الأوامر مخالفة ميل النفس, and in the performance of the commands, there is opposition to the self's inclination. فعبر الله تعالى عن ذلك بلفظ كسبت. And so Allah, exalted is He, expressed that in the revealed expression with the expression of kasabat, with just 3 letters, not including the fourth one. Fourth one, yani, doesn't count here. So if you take off the fourth one, you just have 3 letters, kasaba, and that last one, that ta, it's for the femininity. That part is not relevant to what we're talking about. So that aversion that the self has to working is expressed in the verb that has fewer letters. Kasabat. أما المعاصي فإنها تلائم ميل النفس. As for the disobediences, or the acts of disobedience, they are usually compliant with the self's inclination, because it's going to find enjoyment in those acts of disobedience. فَلَهَا إِلَيْهَا سَعْيٌ حَثِيثٌ. So the human self has, for these actions, stronger motivation, finds more urgency in striving for them. The human self for these actions finds more urgency in striving for them, for the sins. فَعَبَّرَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى عَنْ ذَلِكَ بِالِاكْتِسَابِ. And so Allah expressed that urgency, that extra willingness that the human self finds to strive for a sin, yani to collect and acquire the sin. Allah expressed that with the verb that has more letters. Al-iktisab. Bil-iktisab. Iktasaba. If you remove the ta. Iktasaba. So, laha ma kasabat wa alayha maktasabat. Iktasabat here versus kasabat. In its favor is what it kasabat earned with aversion to working. وَعَلَيْهَا مَكْتَسَبَتْ, and to its detriment is what it earned with more urgency of sins. لأنه يناسب الإضافة لدلالته على الاعتلال والمعالجة. لأنه يناسب الإضافة لدلالته على الاعتلال والمعالجة. So I find this sentence lofty, and I don't see that I can translate it very well. So, rough translation. This wording is more reflective of the effort that is put into committing the sin. وأما من حيث المعنى المصطلح عليه nice. وأما من حيث المعنى المصطلح عليه عند علماء التوحيد. But concerning the technical usage according to the scholars of monotheism, فهما شيء واحد. Those two wordings refer to the same thing. Wallahu a'lam. We'll stop there. And the next section coming up is potentially challenging one anyway. So good to start from the top. Question. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
I want to speak the last sentence before you stop now.
Can you say that again?
Repeat the last sentence.
What's the last sentence?
Yeah, what was the last sentence before you stop? I didn't hear it.
Yes, last sentence was وَأَمَّا مِنْ حَيْثُ الْمَعْنَى الْمُصْطَلَحُ عَلَيْهِ عِنْدَ عُلَمَاءِ التَّوْحِيدِ. As for from the perspective of the technical meaning according to the scholars of monotheism, the Sunni theologians, فَهُمَا شَيْءٌ وَاحِدٌ. Those two words, al-kasb and al-iktisab, refer to the same thing, which is the acquisition of the deed, the created action that's under the slave's power, the created action that's under the slave's power. It's called kasb or iktisab in the science of kalam. But in the tafsir of the ayah, there's a significance that's not intended when the scholars use these words in the science of kalam. That's clear?
I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdik ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.